Derek slid the settlement papers across the desk, his arrogant grin widening under the crystal chandelier. He truly believed he had stripped me of my $50 million empire. He thought my signature marked the surrender of a frail wife, but he did not know the ink on my pen was a death sentence for his freedom. 12 hours from now, when the police crash his party, he will realize he is holding a signed confession, not a title deed. My name is Valerie Sterling, and for the last 10 years, I have ruled the Sterling real estate empire with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. But tonight, in the mahogany-paneled library of our Hamptons estate, I looked like a woman on the verge of total collapse. Derek sat in my leather executive chair, his feet resting disrespectfully on the antique desk my father had carved by hand. He tossed a thick manila folder toward me, the papers sliding across the polished wood and stopping just inches from my fingertips. "Sign it, Valerie," Derek sneered, his voice dripping with a toxic mix of arrogance and impatience. "Transfer the management rights of the company and the deed to this mansion to me. Do it now, or by tomorrow morning. The press will have the fascinating evidence of your offshore tax evasion and your little affair with the pool boy." I stared at him, keeping my face a mask of terrified shock. I am 38 years old, a CEO who has navigated shark-filled boardrooms since I was 22. I knew exactly what a bluff looked like, and I knew exactly how to dismantle a weak opponent. Derek was not a shark. He was a parasite I had allowed to grow too fat. I watched the greed dancing in his eyes, a naked hunger that made him look ugly despite his expensive custom-tailored suit. He had forged the documents. Of course. There was no tax evasion, there was no affair, but he was betting on my fear of scandal to force my hand. You can't do this," I stammered, forcing my voice to break as I looked at the man I had married 5 years ago. Derek laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the walls of books he had never read. "Oh, stop the drama. You are incompetent, Valerie. You have always been a daddy's girl, living off a legacy you don't understand. The board knows it. The investors know it. I am the one with the vision. I am the one who can actually take this empire to the next level instead of letting it rot under your sentimental management." I reached for the heavy fountain pen on the desk. My hand trembled visibly, a performance worthy of an Academy Award. I looked up at him, widening my eyes to show him the submission he craved, letting a single tear dwell in the corner of my eye. "Do you really want all of it, Derek?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You won't leave me anything." He leaned forward, his eyes flicking greedily to the 10-carat diamond ring on my left hand. "I'm doing this to protect the family. Val, you're clearly unstable. I need full control to save us from your mistakes. To protect the family." The audacity was almost impressive. I looked down at the paper. Asset transfer agreement. The cover page read, but I knew what lay beneath the first page. I knew exactly what legal landmines were buried in the text he had not bothered to read thoroughly because his own lawyer was secretly on my payroll. I stopped shaking. I gripped the pen firmly, in one smooth, decisive motion. I signed my name at the bottom of the document. The scratch of the nib against the paper was loud in the silence. Derek blinked, clearly taken aback by my sudden compliance. He had expected more begging, more tears. He snatched the paper away the moment the ink was wet, checking the signature as if he expected disappearing ink. "Smart choice," he muttered, though he looked slightly unsettled by the sudden shift in my demeanor. I stood up slowly. I reached for my left hand and slid the heavy diamond ring off my finger. I placed it on the mahogany desk with a soft clack. Next to it, I laid down the key fob to the Bentley and my black Amex card. "Congratulations, Derek," I said, my voice flat and devoid of the fear I had feigned just moments ago. "You wanted it. You got it. You are the king of this castle now." I turned my back on him. I was wearing simple black yoga pants and a running jacket, no designer purse, no luggage. I walked out of the library, my footsteps silent on the Persian rugs. As I reached the front door, I heard Derek's voice booming from the library, already on the phone. Yeah, she signed it. It's done, baby. The whole $50 million portfolio is mine. Yeah, tonight is going to be epic. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the cool Hamptons night air. I did not look back. I parked the dented, gray rental sedan in the underground garage of a nondescript building in Manhattan. The interior smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and cheap pine air freshener, a stark contrast to the leather-scented interior of the Bentley I had left behind in the Hamptons. This was my sanctuary now, a secret penthouse I had purchased 2 years ago under a shell company name that Derek did not know existed. It was not a home. It was a command center. I took the private elevator up to the top floor, the silence of the apartment welcoming me like an old friend. I did not turn on the main lights. Instead, I walked straight to the wall of monitors I had installed in the study. With a few keystrokes, the screens flickered to life, beaming live feeds from every room of the Sterling estate. There he was. Derek was in the kitchen now, holding a dusty bottle of wine. My breath caught in my throat. It was a 1982 Petrus, the bottle my father had saved for his 50th wedding anniversary, a milestone he never lived to see. Derek popped the cork with a vulgar casualness, as if it were a $10 bottle of table wine, and poured it into a large goblet. He took a swig, not even bothering to savor it, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Watching him, I felt a familiar ache in my chest, not for him, but for the woman I used to be. My mind drifted back 5 years, to the charity auction where we met. He had been so charming then. He had introduced himself as a tech investor from Silicon Valley, wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly and speaking with a confidence that mesmerized me. I invest in potential. He had told me that night, his eyes locking onto mine. And Valerie, I see a lot of potential in you. I was vulnerable then. My parents had passed away in a plane crash just 6 months prior, leaving me with a massive empire and a hollow emptiness in my heart. Derek sensed that void. He filled it with a relentless bombardment of affection. He sent flowers every day. He showed up at my office with lunch just when I was feeling overwhelmed. He was the anchor in my storm. Or so I thought. But the red flags were there, waving frantically in the wind. And I had chosen to look away. I remembered the first time we went to a Michelin-starred restaurant. When the check came, he patted his pockets with a look of feigned confusion. I must have left my wallet in the other jacket, he had said, offering a sheepish, charming smile. Would you mind getting this one? Val, I will make it up to you. Then came the blocked credit cards. It is a bank error, he would insist, looking frustrated. My funds are tied up in a merger. It is so messy right now. I always paid. After the wedding, the mask slipped. The doting partner vanished, replaced by a critic who was never satisfied. He began to chip away at my confidence, dismantling my self-esteem with surgical precision. You are too soft on the staff, he would sneer when I approved a raise for a long-time employee. You run this company like a charity, not a business. You do not have the killer instinct. You are weak. I believed him. I was so desperate for the family life I had lost that I rationalized his laziness. I told myself that by funding his failed startups and paying off his gambling debts, I was just being a supportive wife. I was supporting his dreams. In reality, I was funding my own destruction. A vibration in my pocket pulled me back to the cold, blue light of the penthouse. I looked at my phone. It was a text message from the private investigator I had hired 3 months ago. He called her. I looked up at the monitors. The front gate camera showed a sleek, bright red sports car pulling into the circular driveway. It was the latest model, a car I had seen on the bank statements of the shell company Derek thought was hidden. The driver's door opened, and a pair of long, tanned legs stepped out, followed by a cloud of blonde hair extensions and a tight, sparkling mini dress. It was Kylie, the 22-year-old Instagram model Derek had been investing in for the past year. "Showtime," I whispered to the empty room. On the screen, Derek rushed out the front door, arms wide open, greeting her as if she were the queen returning to her castle. He spun her around, and even through the grainy feed, I could see the triumph on his face. He thought he had won. He thought he had traded an aging, boring wife for a young, exciting trophy. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was already crumbling. Kylie strutted into the foyer, her heels clicking against the marble floors like an assault rifle. She spun around, wrinkling her nose as she surveyed the hand-painted wallpaper and the 19th-century oil paintings that my grandfather had collected in Europe. "Babe, seriously?" Kylie whined, her voice grating against my ears through the high-definition speakers in my penthouse. "This place is so depressing. It smells like old people. We need to gut it. Everything has to go." Derek wrapped his arms around her waist, looking at the walls of my family home with lustful eyes. "Anything you want, princess. We will rip out that stuffy wood paneling. And that office where Valerie spent all her time pretending to work, I will bulldoze it. We will turn it into a state-of-the-art gym and that TikTok studio you wanted. The lighting will be perfect for your brand, my father's study, the room where he taught me how to read a blueprint. Derek was going to turn it into a backdrop for vanity videos." I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles turning white, but I did not look away. Less than 1 hour later, the doorbell rang. It was not a guest. It was an invasion. Derek's mother, Brenda, and his sister, Clara, burst through the door, dragging 4 enormous suitcases. They had clearly been parked around the corner, waiting for the signal that the usurper had taken the throne. Brenda did not even say hello. She marched straight to the display cabinet in the dining room, her eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. She ran her hands over the Ming Dynasty vases, leaving greasy fingerprints on the porcelain. "Finally," Brenda sighed, clutching a vase as if she had already pawned it in her mind. "I have had my eye on these for years. That stingy witch never let me touch anything. She always looked at us like we were dirt." "Clara, go upstairs and secure the goods before Kylie claims the best pieces." "I am on it," Clara shouted, sprinting up the grand staircase. I sat in the darkness of my Manhattan command center, the blue light of the monitors illuminating my face. Through the audio feed, I heard the sound of my closet doors being thrown open. Clara was rummaging through my life, tossing my Hermes and Chanel bags onto the floor. "Oh my God!" "Mom!" Clara shrieked. She was sitting at my vanity table, holding up my sapphire necklace. She pulled out her phone and immediately started a live stream. I watched the feed on a separate screen. She posed, tilting her head to catch the light. "Hey guys, look what my amazing brother just bought me. We are finally living the life we deserve. No more toxic people holding us back." Toxic? I almost laughed. Downstairs, Derek was pouring more wine for his mother. She signed it all over. Mom, everything. The company, the house, the accounts. We are worth $50 million as of tonight. "You are a genius, my boy," Brenda cooed, sipping the wine. "I knew you would outsmart her. What is the plan now? Do we have to keep running that boring real estate company?" Derek laughed, leaning back in my father's armchair. "Are you kidding? I am not wasting my life in boardrooms. I am going to liquidate the assets, sell the buildings, sell the land. We are going to cash out. I am putting everything into that new cryptocurrency Mark told me about. Then we are taking a private jet around the world." And Valerie Kiley asked, looking up from her phone where she was likely ordering new furniture. "She won't come back. Valerie is history," Derek said, his voice dropping to a tone of utter contempt. "I never loved her, Kylie. You know that? She was just an old cash cow. I just had to milk her until she was dry and then kick her to the curb." I reached out and pressed a single button on my keyboard. Recording saved. Enjoy the milk. Derek, I whispered to the screen. Because you are about to choke on it. I opened my laptop and initiated a secure video call. The screen flickered for a moment before the face of Arthur Harrison appeared. Arthur had been the Sterling family attorney for 40 years, a man whose silver hair and grandfatherly smile hid the instincts of a ruthless legal predator. He was the kind of lawyer who did not just win cases, he buried the opposition under so much paperwork and precedent that they never saw the sun again. Valerie, Arthur said, his voice calm and steady through the encrypted connection. The document he forced you to sign today. Has it been filed? I leaned back in my chair, allowing a small, cold smile to touch my lips. He sent a digital copy to his lawyer 10 minutes ago. He believes he has just secured the deed to the mansion and the controlling interest in Sterling Holdings. However, he does not know what he actually sent. Arthur nodded, his eyes twinkling with grim satisfaction. Excellent. And he has no idea you have been watching him. None. I replied. I found the first unauthorized transfer 3 months ago. $10,000 wired to a consulting firm that turned out to be registered to Kylie Miller's apartment address. Most wives would have screamed and thrown a vase. I did the opposite. I went silent. I brought up the spreadsheet on my second monitor. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. Instead of confronting Derek immediately, I had hired a team of forensic auditors to track every penny he had moved. We discovered he had set up a shell company, Delta Holdings, which he used to siphon funds from construction projects. He thought he was clever, burying the theft in inflated material costs, but he was sloppy. He thought he was forcing me to sign an asset transfer agreement. I explained to Arthur, recounting the sleight of hand I had performed in the library. But I swapped the interior pages 5 minutes before he walked into the room. The cover page was the same. The signature page was the same. But the 20 pages in between, that was the debt assumption and personal liability admission. Arthur chuckled. A dry sound like rustling paper. A beautiful piece of legal work, if I do say so myself. By signing that as the new self-appointed CEO, he has legally accepted full, unlimited personal liability for every debt and financial crime associated with Delta Holdings. And since Delta Holdings is currently $15 million in debt due to his gambling and embezzlement, I added, he has essentially signed his own financial death warrant. I minimized the video window and pulled up the banking control panel. It was time to tighten the noose. I have already executed the next phase, I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I canceled all automatic payments for the Hamptons estate 24 hours ago. The electricity, the water, the gas, the internet, everything is past due. The grace period ends at midnight. I opened the corporate server admin tool. Derek's login credentials were still active, a digital key he thought gave him access to the kingdom. I selected his user profile. Status active. I clicked deactivate. Status revoked. I then initiated the lockdown protocol for all corporate bank accounts linked to his authorization. Within seconds, the bars on the screen turned from green to red. His access to the company servers is gone. I told Arthur. His credit cards are frozen. The bank accounts he thinks are his are now locked down pending an internal fraud investigation. He is a king with no treasury and no army. Arthur leaned closer to the camera. You know he will try to fight this. He will say you tricked him. Let him try, I said, my voice hardening. He wanted to take everything I built. He wanted to be the master of the house. I am just giving him exactly what he asked for. I looked at the image of Derek on the surveillance feed, laughing with his mother as they toasted with my wine. He wants to be a king, I whispered. I will let him wear the crown. But he is going to find out very quickly that it is a crown of thorns. The sun rose over the Hamptons, casting a golden glow over my estate, but inside the mansion, a new ice age had begun. I sat in my warm penthouse, sipping hot coffee, watching the chaos unfold on my monitors with a sense of grim satisfaction. Derek woke up first, shivering violently under the thin silk sheets. He reached for the thermostat control panel next to the bed. tapping the screen furiously. "What the hell?" Derek muttered, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Why is it 50 degrees in here?" He rolled over and shook Kylie awake. She groaned, pulling the duvet over her head. "Kylie, did you mess with the smart home settings?" Derek shouted, his voice cracking with irritation. I didn't touch anything," Kylie whined, her teeth chattering as she sat up. "I just wanted to turn on the mood lighting last night." But the screen went black. Derek stormed into the bathroom. A moment later, a high-pitched scream echoed through the speakers. He came running out, a towel wrapped around his waist, his skin covered in goosebumps. "There is no hot water," he yelled, pacing the room. "The boiler must be down. Useless piece of junk house." He marched to the wall-mounted iPad to reboot the system. He punched in his passcode. The screen flashed red, "Access denied, administrator privileges revoked." "What do you mean revoked?" he screamed at the wall. "I am the owner." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Not anymore." "Derek, I had remotely locked the entire environmental control system at 3 o'clock in the morning. Downstairs, the situation was deteriorating rapidly." Brenda was sitting at the dining table wrapped in her fur coat, looking like a disgruntled bear. "Derek," she barked as he entered the kitchen. "Where is the staff? Where is my breakfast? I need my herbal tea and poached eggs. The staff is off today." "Mom," Derek lied, his eyes darting around nervously. "I will order in. We will get the best breakfast in the Hamptons delivered. Caviar omelets for everyone." He pulled out his phone and opened a delivery app for a 5-star restaurant. He placed a massive order and hit pay. Payment declined. He frowned and tried another card. The Platinum Visa. Payment declined. "Come on," he hissed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. He tried a third card, the black Amex he had stolen from my desk. Card invalid. "Is there a problem?" son Brenda asked, tapping her manicured fingernails on the table. "No, just banking algorithms," Derek stammered, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "I moved so much money yesterday that the system is flagging small purchases. I just need to call the bank." He put the phone on speaker, his arrogance making him careless. "Welcome to First National," the automated voice chirped. "Please hold for a fraud specialist." A human voice came on the line almost immediately. "Mr. Wilson, we have locked these accounts due to suspicious activity. The primary account holder, Mrs. Sterling, has reported these cards as stolen and unauthorized." Derek slammed the phone down before the representative could finish. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. "Stolen?" Kylie asked, narrowing her eyes. "I thought you said she gave them to you." "She did," Derek yelled, his voice rising an octave. "She is just playing games. She is bitter. It is a technical glitch with the transfer papers. I will sort it out." Just then, a piercing scream tore through the air from the direction of the garage. It was Clara. Derek, come here." We all watched on the cameras as Derek ran to the garage, followed by Kylie and Brenda. He threw open the door and stopped dead in his tracks. The garage, which usually housed a fleet of luxury vehicles, was empty. My Porsche 911 was gone. The Mercedes S-Class was gone. Even the vintage Jaguar was missing. "Where are the cars?" Clara shrieked, pointing at the empty concrete spots. "I wanted to drive the convertible." I smiled. My corporate asset recovery team had been very efficient. Since the cars were leased under Sterling Holdings and Derek was no longer an authorized employee, they had been repossessed quietly at 4 o'clock in the morning. Derek pulled out his phone, his hands shaking uncontrollably now. He dialed my number. I watched the call come in on my cell phone lying on the desk. I let it ring once, then twice. Before the automated message I had set up kicked in, "The number you have reached has permanently blocked your number. Goodbye." Derek stared at his phone in disbelief. The color drained from his face. "She blocked me," he whispered. Kylie crossed her arms, shivering in her thin robe. She looked at the empty garage, then at Derek's terrified face. "So," Kylie said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "we have no heat, no food, no cars, and your cards are declined. You are some billionaire. Derek, I can't even get a bagel." "Shut up," Derek snapped, but his voice lacked its usual bite. Panic was setting in. He looked around the empty, freezing garage, realizing that the castle he thought he had conquered was rapidly turning into a prison. Desperation has a distinct smell, and by 6 o'clock that evening, the Sterling Manor reeked of it. In a frantic attempt to prove to Kylie and his leeching family that he was indeed the billionaire he claimed to be, Derek decided to host an impromptu housewarming party. Since his credit cards were frozen blocks of plastic, he had bullied a local catering company into providing service with the promise of a triple cash payment the next morning. I sat in the conference room of Harrison's law firm, the large screen on the wall projecting the circus act Derek was broadcasting to the world. He had cracked open the wine cellar, distributing bottles of vintage Bordeaux worth $5,000 apiece to a crowd of sycophants, failed influencers, and high school buddies who had not seen him in a decade. "Look at them," I said, my voice flat. "They are treating a historical estate like a frat house." On the screen, a man with a backwards baseball cap was smoking a cigar inside the gallery, flicking ashes onto the floor inches away from a genuine Monet. "Let them enjoy it," Harrison said, adjusting his spectacles as he watched the feed. "Every scratch on the floorboards, every broken glass. It is all adding to the itemized bill of damages we will present to the judge." Then, the main event began. Derek climbed onto the mahogany dining table, his shoes scuffing the polished wood. He held up his phone, starting a Facebook live stream. "What is up?" "Everyone," Derek shouted, his face flushed with alcohol and adrenaline. "Welcome to the new Sterling Empire, out with the old, boring management, and in with the visionaries. I am the captain now." Harrison leaned forward, tapping his pen against his legal pad. "And there it is. Public admission of unauthorized control." Derek spun the camera around to show the chaotic party. "We are going to shake things up. I am selling off the old real estate division. Who needs bricks and mortar when you have the blockchain? I am liquidating the assets to go all in on the new Ape King NFT project. We are going to the moon." "Baby." I watched as the comments section on his video exploded. My actual business partners and shareholders were watching. "You cannot sell the company assets." "Derek, that is illegal." One board member commented. "I am calling the SEC," wrote another. Derek saw the notifications popping up. He laughed. A manic, unhinged sound. "Look at these haters. They are just jealous of my genius." Blocked, deleted. "You are all banned from my success." He tapped the screen furiously, erasing the warnings of the very people who could send him to prison, convinced he was silencing the opposition. He just stated his intent to dissipate corporate assets for personal speculative investment, Harrison noted, his voice devoid of emotion. "That is intent to defraud shareholders. We have him on tape." But the finale was yet to come. Kylie stumbled into the frame. She was wearing my custom-made Givenchy evening gown, a dress I had worn to the Met Gala 3 years ago. It was 3 sizes too big for her, and she had safety pinned the back to make it fit. She held a glass of red wine in one hand and a half-eaten shrimp in the other. Baby Kylie slurred, waving at the camera. Tell them, I am the queen." She tried to climb onto the table to join him. She missed her step. In a moment of slapstick tragedy, Kylie fell backward, the glass of dark. Rich Cabernet flew from her hand and splashed across the pristine, white Italian leather sofa. The red stain bloomed instantly, soaking into the porous material like blood on snow. "Oops," Kylie giggled, trying to wipe it off with the hem of my $10,000 dress, only smearing it further. Derek panned the camera back to himself, oblivious to the destruction of a $20,000 piece of furniture behind him. He was too busy dancing to the music, unaware that he was not celebrating a victory, but filming his own confession. "He has no idea, does he?" I asked, closing the laptop. "No," Harrison replied, closing his file with a sharp snap. "He thinks he is partying in a palace. He does not realize he is dancing on the edge of a cliff." The digital clock on my iPad screen flicked over to 10 o'clock. It was the precise moment I had chosen to end the charade. I sat in the hushed silence of my office, the glow of the tablet reflecting in my eyes. With a single, deliberate tap of my finger, I engaged the Fortress Protocol, a security setting I had installed for extreme emergencies but had never expected to use against my own husband. In an instant, the feed on my monitor went dark. Inside the Sterling mansion, the heavy bass of the dance music was sliced off, replaced by a silence that lasted for a heartbeat. Then, the emergency floodlights bathed the house in a harsh, flashing red glare, and the siren began. It was a sound designed to disorient, a piercing wail that vibrated through the bones, through the night vision cameras. I watched the party disintegrate into absolute bedlam. The freelance catering staff were the first to run, dropping trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres as they bolted for the service exits. The guests, the leeches who had been drinking my wine and trashing my home, screamed and scrambled over one another to get to the front door. It was a stampede of sequins and cheap tuxedos. Then, the voice of the house AI boomed through the speakers, devoid of warmth, stripping away any illusion of welcome. "Intruder alert," the synthetic voice announced, echoing off the high ceilings. "Facial recognition scan complete. Occupants do not match authorized owner identity. Local law enforcement has been dispatched. You are trespassing on private property." The main gates at the end of the driveway began to close. The massive iron bars swung shut with a final metallic clang, sealing the perimeter. I saw the taillights of the guests' cars jam up against the gate, trapping the stragglers inside, but the real targets, Derek, Kylie, Brenda, and Clara, were stuck on the front lawn, abandoned by their so-called friends. "What is happening?" Brenda screamed, clutching her stolen loot to her chest. She turned on Derek, her face twisted in a mask of fury. "You said this was your house. You said you fixed the papers. Why are the police coming? It is a mistake," Derek yelled back, though his voice was thin and trembling. "I am the owner. I signed the papers." Kylie was sobbing hysterically, tapping furiously on her smartphone. "I can't get a signal. My phone says no service. I can't call an Uber. Derek, do something. I am not going to jail." "The house has a localized signal jammer," I murmured to myself, taking a slow, calming sip of chamomile tea. "No one calls out. No one gets in." Derek ran to the external security panel near the front door. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hit the buttons. I watched him punch in his old PIN code, the one he had used for 5 years. He hit enter. The keypad flashed red. "Invalid access code," the AI voice declared, louder this time. "Countermeasures initiated. You have 30 seconds to vacate the premises before non-lethal tear gas deployment is activated. 29, 28. No, no, no." Derek screamed, hammering his fist against the metal box. "I am Derek Wilson. I live here. Open the damn gate. 20. 19. The voice counted down relentlessly. Suddenly, a buzzing sound cut through the noise of the siren, from the darkness above the tree line. A security drone from the private neighborhood patrol descended. It hovered 20 feet above Derek's head, the downdraft whipping his hair into a frenzy. A blinding white spotlight snapped on, pinning him against the wall of the house like a bug under a microscope. Derek threw his hands up to shield his eyes, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked small. He looked pathetic. The arrogant king who had sat in my chair just hours ago was now cowering in the dirt, terrified of a machine. I watched it all from the safety of my penthouse, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the tea. It was the warmth of justice. They had wanted to take my sanctuary from me, to leave me with nothing. Now, they were the ones trapped in a nightmare of their own making, waiting for the inevitable sound of police sirens to cut through the night. Checkmate, I whispered. The morning sun exposed the humiliating reality of Derek's situation. He, his mother, his sister, and his mistress were huddled together on the damp grass of the front lawn, shivering in their ruined party clothes. They looked like refugees from a failed circus. At exactly 8 o'clock, the crunch of gravel announced my arrival. A convoy of 3 black SUVs rolled through the now open gates, moving with the precision of a funeral procession. I stepped out of the lead vehicle. I was immaculate in a white tailored suit, flanked by 2 stone-faced private security contractors. Arthur Harrison emerged from the second car, clutching a leather briefcase. Derek scrambled to his feet when he saw me. His eyes were bloodshot, and his tuxedo shirt was stained with sweat and dirt. He lunged toward me, his hands curled into fists, but he did not make it 3 steps. My lead bodyguard stepped forward and stopped him with a single firm hand to the chest, shoving him back so hard he stumbled. "What the hell are you doing?" Derek screamed, his voice raw and cracking. "This house is mine. You signed the papers I have your signature." Arthur Harrison adjusted his glasses and stepped forward, his demeanor calm and professional. He pulled a crisp document from his briefcase and held it up for Derek to see. "Mr. Wilson, you should really read the fine print before you celebrate," Arthur said, his voice cutting through the morning air like a knife. "You did not sign a transfer of assets. You signed an unlimited liability agreement. Specifically, you signed the debt assumption and personal liability admission for the Delta subsidiary." Derek stared at the paper, his mouth hanging open. "What?" "What are you talking about, Delta Holdings?" Arthur continued. "Is the shell company you created to embezzle funds. By signing this as the CEO, you acknowledged that you are personally responsible for its current financial standing, which, according to our forensic audit, is currently in debt to the tune of $15 million. Derek turned pale. He looked at me, searching for a lie, but I only offered him a cold, pitying smile. "You see, Derek," I said, my voice steady. "The Sterling Mansion and the controlling shares of Sterling Holdings are locked in an irrevocable family trust. My father set it up that way. I am merely the trustee. I do not have the legal authority to sign them over to you or anyone else. My signature on that transfer document, it is legally worthless. It is void." I took a step closer to him, enjoying the way he shrank back. "However," I emphasized, "your signature on the debt admission is perfectly valid. You admitted to the embezzlement, you admitted to the fraud, and you agreed to pay back every single cent of the $15 million plus interest." A gasp came from behind him. Kylie, who had been shivering in my ruined Givenchy dress, stepped away from Derek as if he were radioactive. $15 million, Kylie screeched, her eyes wide with horror. You are in debt? You said you were rich." "Kylie, wait, it is a trick," Derek stammered, reaching for her arm. "Don't touch me," she yelled, slapping his hand away. "I am not going down for this. I didn't do anything. I barely know him." She backed away rapidly, putting as much distance between herself and the sinking ship as possible. Brenda stepped forward then, trying to muster some dignity despite her disheveled appearance. She clutched her handbag tightly to her chest. "Valerie, how could you?" Brenda wailed, squeezing out a fake tear. "We are family. I treated you like a daughter. This is cruel. You are an ungrateful, heartless woman." I motioned to Arthur. He handed me a tablet. I tapped the screen and turned it toward her. "This is an invoice. Brenda," I said coldly. "It details the cost of the antique rug your son's mistress destroyed, the broken stemware, and the damage to the art gallery from your little party last night. The total comes to $45,000. I expect payment within 30 days. Or I will sue you for destruction of private property." Brenda's jaw dropped. She looked from the invoice to her son, realizing there was no safety net left. I turned to Derek. He was shaking, looking at the ground, utterly defeated. I waited until he looked up, forcing him to meet my gaze. "You wanted a signature to change your life," I asked softly. "I gave it to you. Now pay the price." The sirens that cut through the morning air were different from the house alarm. These were the sharp, authoritative wails of the Economic Crimes Unit. Within minutes, the driveway was swarming with uniformed officers and detectives in cheap suits. They moved with a practiced efficiency. Boxing Derek in against the side of my SUV, "Derek Wilson," the lead detective announced, holding up a warrant that fluttered in the breeze. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, grand larceny, corporate fraud, and forgery of legal documents." Derek struggled as the officer grabbed his wrist, twisting it behind his back. "No, this is a mistake." "She set me up." "That woman, she is the one you want. She tricked me." The detective did not even look at me. He simply pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Derek's own voice, loud and drunken from the night before, drifted from the tiny speaker. "I am liquidating the assets, putting everything into crypto. I am the captain now." "We watched your live stream, Mr. Wilson," the detective said dryly, snapping the handcuffs shut. "You confessed to conspiracy to defraud shareholders and intent to dissipate assets. It was very helpful of you to record your own confession." As Derek was being manhandled toward the patrol car, I looked at Brenda. A normal mother would be screaming, crying, begging the officers to be gentle with her son. But Brenda stood frozen, her eyes darting nervously not to Derek, but to the oversized designer handbag she was clutching to her chest with a white-knuckled grip. She was inching backward, trying to fade into the hedges. "Officer," I said, my voice cutting through the commotion, "I believe you should check Mrs. Wilson's bag and Miss Wilson's pockets." A female officer stepped in front of Brenda. "Ma'am, open the bag." "Now." "You can't do this," Brenda screeched, pulling the bag away. "This is my personal property. I am a guest here." The officer did not ask twice. She snatched the bag and dumped the contents onto the hood of the police cruiser. It was a treasure trove of theft. My emerald earrings, 3 of my vintage Rolex watches, and a handful of silver serving spoons clattered onto the metal. Clara was no better. The officer patted her down and pulled a diamond tennis bracelet and 2 of my platinum credit cards from her coat pocket. "You are both under arrest for grand larceny," the officer stated, pulling out 2 more pairs of zip-tie cuffs. It was her idea, Clara yelled, pointing at her mother as the plastic cuffs bit into her wrists. "Mom told me to take them." She said Valerie wouldn't notice to my left. I saw a flash of movement. Kylie was trying to sidle past the police line, her heels sinking into the grass, hoping to disappear down the driveway. "Miss Miller," I called out. Kylie froze. She turned slowly, her mascara running down her cheeks. "You have a balance to settle," I said, walking over to her. "You are wearing a $10,000 couture gown that is now ruined with wine stains and grass marks. My lawyer will be mailing the invoice to your parents' house." I didn't know, Kylie sobbed, her hands shaking. "I just wanted to date a rich guy. I didn't know he was stealing it. And yet, you accepted $50,000 in transfers from his shell company," a detective said, stepping up behind her. "We need to ask you some questions about those funds. Miss Miller, you are coming with us as a material witness and a person of interest in the embezzlement scheme." They hauled them all away. The last thing I saw was Derek's face pressed against the glass of the rear window of the police cruiser. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of pure hatred and bottomless despair. He mouthed something at me, a curse probably, but I could not hear it. I looked at him, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt absolutely nothing. He was not my husband. He was not my partner. He was just a stranger who had tried to pick the wrong pocket. As the convoy of police cars disappeared down the long driveway, silence finally returned to the estate. The birds began to chirp again. The air felt cleaner, lighter. I turned to the head of my household staff, who had been watching from the porch. "Get a crew out here," I ordered, my voice calm and steady. "I want every trace of that party gone by noon. Scrub the driveway. Re-sod the lawn where they parked." I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for my contractor. "It is Valerie," I said when he answered. "I have a job for you. I want the locks changed on every door. Today. And send a team to the master bedroom. Remove the bed, the furniture, the carpets. Everything. If he touched it, I do not want it in my house. Auction it all off and donate the proceeds to the shelter for victims of domestic fraud. I want a clean slate." 1 week later, I walked into the federal courthouse wearing a tailored white suit that shone like armor under the fluorescent lights. I felt a sense of calm that I had not experienced in years. There was no shaking, no hesitation, and certainly no fear. I was not there as a victim. I was there as the witness to my own liberation. Derek sat at the defense table, hunched over in a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He looked 10 years older than he had just 7 days ago. His lawyer had negotiated a plea deal to avoid a public trial that would have humiliated him further, but the terms were severe. He was facing 10 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay restitution of $15 million, a sum we both knew he would never earn in 10 lifetimes. When the judge asked him if he had anything to say, Derek stood up slowly. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at his weeping mother in the back row. He looked at me. I always hated it," Derek stammered, his voice rough and broken. "I hated that you were the smart one. I wanted to destroy you, just to feel like I was the man in the room. I thought if I took everything, I would finally be someone." I watched him with a detached curiosity. It was a pathetic admission of a fragile ego. He had burned down our life not out of necessity, but out of pure, unadulterated envy. The judge raised his gavel. The sound of it striking the wooden block was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It echoed through the room, signaling the final second of a 5-year nightmare. It was over. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright afternoon sun. Near the sidewalk, a group of people in neon vests were performing court-ordered community service. I paused as I recognized a familiar figure sweeping cigarette butts into a dustpan. It was Kylie. Her blonde extensions were gone, replaced by a messy ponytail, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked up and locked eyes with me for a brief second. There was no arrogance left, only shame. She quickly lowered her head and shoveled trash into her bag, shrinking away from my gaze. I did not stop. I got into my car and drove straight to Sterling Holdings. When I walked into the lobby, the atmosphere had shifted. The whispers stopped. The staff stood up. They did not look at me with pity. They looked at me with genuine respect. I called an emergency board meeting and wasted no time. "We are restructuring," I announced, my voice ringing with authority. "Every person Derek hired, every sycophant who helped him drain this company, is terminated effective immediately. We are cutting out the parasites." By 5 o'clock that evening, I stood in the quiet solitude of the family cemetery. I placed a bouquet of fresh white lilies on the marble stone shared by my parents. The wind rustled the leaves of the old oak tree, sounding like a whisper. "I did it," I said softly to the cold stone. "I protected what you built, but more importantly, I found the daughter you raised. She was lost for a while, but she is back now." That night, the mansion was silent. It was no longer a cold, empty museum, but a sanctuary. I sat by the fireplace in the library, the crackling logs providing the only light. I poured myself a glass of vintage wine, but this time, I drank it with a smile. I was alone, yet I did not feel lonely. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the fountain pen. It was the same heavy black pen I had used to sign the documents that set this entire trap in motion. I rolled it between my fingers one last time, feeling the weight of the memories attached to it. Then, with a flick of my wrist, I tossed it into the fire. The flames licked around the plastic and metal, consuming it. I watched until it was nothing but ash and twisted scrap. The past was gone. I opened a fresh leather-bound journal on my lap. I uncapped a new pen and wrote the first entry of my new life. Today, the real life of Valerie Sterling really begins. No more fear, no more compromise. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with our community. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it.